Hi, guys. Quick announcement. This story has some unsettling topics and trigger words. If you're struggling with things such as self harm, I've put some helpful links in the description. If this type of story is not your cup of tea, please, please, please do not watch. And if you are unaffected, just proceed with caution. And again, stay safe and healthy and happy. Again, there's helpful links in the description, and I hope that you guys enjoy the story. Thank you. I pulled into the packed grocery store parking lot, scanning the aisles for an empty space. With no luck whatsoever, I gave up and decided to park in the very back. I was feeling good and the weather was perfect, so I didn't mind walking the extra distance. As I drove towards the back of the lot, I could see storm clouds marring the sunny sky in that one particular area. When I parked my car and got out, I immediately spotted an old, beaten up looking shopping cart under a large, sprawling oak tree. It was severely rusted and one of the wheels appeared to be loose. Clearly, nobody's first choice. It started raining hard all at once, but only where I was standing. I definitely thought that was odd, but my attention was quickly diverted back to the cart. I can't really explain the feeling that came over me. I looked at the broken down old buggy and felt something I can only describe as pity. I decided to grab the cart and make a run for it towards the store. The rain seemed to follow me all the way. Once I was inside the store, I pulled the grocery list I had written from my purse. There wasn't a lot on it, just a few things I needed, some noodles, milk, cheese, yogurt, tissue paper. The cart emitted all manner of annoying and disconcerting noises as I made my way up and down the aisles. It squeaked loudly, and the broken wheel made it impossible to turn smoothly. But I stubbornly continued on, putting item after item inside my dilapidated new companion. I went to put a container of yogurt in the cart when I saw it. A bottle of bleach that wasn't there just seconds before. It wasn't on my list. I didn't put it there. It was at that precise moment that I was hit with an overwhelming feeling of dread. My body tensed up and my hands gripped the cart handle, unable to move. A wave of confusion and intense anxiety poured over me. I couldn't take my eyes off the bleach. Then I heard it. A man's voice that apparently only I could hear. "Drink it," the voice said, a gentle suggestion at first. I looked around, but there was no one near me. My right hand released the handle of the cart and began to tremble. I began reaching for the large white bottle inside of the cart, but was able to stop myself. "Drink it," the voice growled angrily. I slowed my breathing and regained some of my composure, but I knew I wasn't fully in control. I watched my hands grip the cart handle again, pushing it forward. I became increasingly terrified with each unwilling step I took. A minute or so later, though it felt like an eternity, I found myself in the kitchenware section of the store. My field of vision became filled with shelves and shelves of razor-sharp cutlery. I watched helplessly as complete strangers passed me, desperately begging them for help with my eyes. When I looked back at the cart, I saw a large serrated chef's knife waiting for me inside. "Cut," the voice said. I was suddenly struck with an incredibly vivid mental image that made me feel like my heart was going to explode. I could see myself tearing the packaging open and removing the long knife. Before I could even register another thought, I felt blood dripping down my neck, spurting out. Customers continued to walk casually by me like nothing out of the ordinary was happening. "Keep cutting. Deeper. You can do it," the voice repeated in an encouraging tone over and over. Then I felt myself snap back to reality. There was no blood or pain, and the knife was still sitting in my cart in its packaging. I started moving again, a white-knuckled grip on the handle as I marched further into hell. A million thoughts raced through my mind at once. Was this a dream? No, I knew I wasn't dreaming. A psychotic break of some kind? I've never had any issues with mental illness. It's the shopping cart. This cart is evil. It seemed too absurd to even fathom, but it was the only conclusion my frantic mind could piece together in that moment. I looked up and saw a big hanging sign that said hardware, and my heart sunk. The cart made a sharp right turn down an aisle that was filled with tools. When I glanced at the reciprocating saw, I experienced another horrifying vision. I could hear the high-pitched whine of the blade as it moved rapidly back and forth, slicing my flesh with petrifying efficiency. The voice began laughing hysterically as the blade cut into bone and severed 3 of my fingers clean off. An unseen force guided my eyes over to a hammer on the left side of the cart. "Smash your skull," the voice yelled. "Smash it!" My hand began shaking again, and this time I knew that I couldn't stop it. I picked up the hammer, feeling the textured rubber grip on the handle. I turned it around so the claw part of the hammer was facing me. I heard the voice quietly whisper its final words. "There's no point. You are nothing." As I stood in the middle of the aisle holding the hammer, I could hear the sound of my skull cracking open. And again, the blood pouring down my face. I felt the searing pain of the metal claw embedded in my head, but it wasn't real, I reminded myself. Not yet. My eyes were fixed hard on the hammer in my shaking hand. I struggled with every fiber of my being to hold it back. Just as my last ounce of willpower was stolen from me, I felt the shopping cart being ripped from my hands. The teenage boy who worked at the store was staring back at me with a concerned expression. I immediately regained full control of my mind and body. "What just happened?" is all I could say, almost afraid to even draw a breath. The young employee glanced at the cart and back to me. "Nobody uses this cart. It's evil." "Why do you think we put it all the way in the back of the parking lot?" You know when you're at home after a long day at work and you are just bone tired and ravenous for the bleak dinner you have been looking forward to all day? But then you realize that you are cleared out of food. Nothing in the pantry, nothing in the fridge. And you thank God or whoever you believe in that the grocery store around the corner doesn't close until 10? Okay. So that was my Friday night last week. I know, it's not a Friday night to brag about, but it's how I ended up at the grocery store at closing time. Anyway, it was 9:50 p.m. and I was desperate, so I shoved my feet into some slides, pulled on a ratty flannel, and bent against the borderline torrential downpour outside. The sprint to the sliding automatic door of the G-Mart was completely deserted, and the street lights had already been triggered to turn on to provide a flickering path through the curtains of rain. When the door registered my presence, it banged open, rattled the cracked plastic, and echoing down the empty street. Finally shielded from the elements, I could shake up my hair and slosh the water out of my shoes, splattering the linoleum tile with droplets. Checking my watch, I saw it was already 9:55 p.m., and my gut twisted, knowing I would either be kicked out or force the employees to stay overtime in this sorry excuse for a store. This grocery store was bare bones. It was made up of a towering set of shelves that separated the space into 2 narrow aisles. All along the other 3 walls were refrigerated shelves protected by glass doors. The very front of the room held a checkout counter with a foot-long conveyor belt to carry the food to the register. It wasn't even long enough to have any of those plastic separators. 1 customer at a time, please. The lights were dim, fluorescent, and for some reason, that night they had a greenish hue. My eyes went straight to my go-to spot at the back, the microwave dinner shelves. I started forward and was almost immediately bulldozed by a woman with wild gray hair and a gaunt, sunken face. She didn't even look at me as she hauled a bright red grocery basket through the front door. She was barefoot. "Excuse you," I called after her, irritated, attempting to recover from stumbling back to avoid her. Looking around, suddenly aware of my surroundings, I realized that I was now alone. There wasn't anyone at the register. The stool behind the counter sat empty. I couldn't hear any footsteps or shuffling in the aisles, only the buzzing sound of the lights as they fought to stay on in the drum of rain outside. "Hello?" I ventured, not as confidently as I would have liked, but we're all friends here, so I won't kid you. When no one responded, I started forward towards my dinner. I figured they had just stepped out to go to the restroom or had gone to the back, assuming there was a back. Maybe they had to run to their car. I squatted to the lowest shelf and swiped up a classic meatloaf for 1. With the box tucked under my arm, I stood. Directly in front of me On the other side of the shelves of refrigerated boxes, in the dark recesses of the Beyond the Cold section, was a pair of shiny, reflective eyes looking straight at me. I stumbled back, dropping my meatloaf, and the eyes blinked out. They had been shiny and otherworldly, like a coyote at night. They had been at eye level and had been round and large. Not like a person. Not like a Gmart employee. I know this sounds like a momentary hallucination of a lonely person who forgot to take their meds and freaked themselves out alone at night in the rain, but it's not. I wish it was, but just hold on. I'm not expecting you to believe me, but just imagine if you were in my shoes and this was real. Laying on the floor, shaking in my slides, I stared into the abyss of the refrigerated section. The door was stuck open from when I had pulled it all the way to its full range of motion so I could root around on the low shelves. The chill from inside wafted out, crystallizing the air and yanking goose pimples from my exposed skin, still damp from the rain. Behind the shelves and boxes of frozen food was pitch black. But staring back into the dark, dark emptiness, dread curled into my throat and a pit formed in my stomach as a pair of shiny yellow eyes blinked open above the second to bottom shelf, eye level with me, watching. I scrambled back with a yelp and they blinked at me slowly. Over the crackling loudspeakers, I could hear the faintest buzz of a tinny rendition of Closing Time by Semisonic ringing out. Sliding my eyes to my watch, it flashed 10 at me. Closing time. I clambered to my feet, abandoning my dinner, and stumbled backwards without taking my eyes away from the blinking gaze, now back at my standing eye level. I stared as another pair of shiny eyes blinked into existence beside the original pair, and another one, and another one. My heart and my mind were racing. What was back there? Not people. Were there animals? Mutant rats? Bats? Monsters? And why were they just staring at me? To my right, I heard a scuffling noise. Daring to look away from whatever was looking at me, I slid my gaze to trace the sound. And behind the refrigeration shelves on the wall to my right, I saw a pale, slender hand delicately wrap around a bottle of orange soda. It ever so slowly tipped it backwards towards the darkness and dragged it into the black, scraping along the ribbed shelf. I whipped my head back to the left, only to see another hand with long, spindly fingers ending in narrow, nailless points extending from the inky black, wrap around a busted-open carton of eggs and bump it backwards into the nothing. I am not ashamed to say that I hightailed it. I spun around like a cartoon character in a cloud of dust and sprinted for the automatic door. The automatic door, whose green power light was now a dull off, whose push in case of emergency sign turned out to be a handwritten sticker added for what I assume is legal reasons, clearly not safety reasons. It wouldn't budge. I kicked it and pounded on it, but the hard plastic would not even rattle in its tracks like it had earlier when I walked in. I spun around, draped against the door and heaving, trying not to sob. Inside the fluorescent lit refrigeration units that I was able to see from my vantage points against the entrance, I could see dozens of white, almost translucent hands. They moved as though connected to each other. A well-oiled machine doing God only knows what. I could only imagine what many-armed monster lay in wait in the dark back there. The only sound it made was the scrape of movement along the shelves. Otherwise, silence. Desperately searching my mind for an idea, I gripped my hair with my hands and tried to keep the panic-induced bile down. I looked around wildly for anything that could help, anything that could get me out of there. There! In the corner of the ceiling, there was a security camera. It was pointed at the front door, clearly to discourage shoplifting. There was a little red light, and it was actually blinking. If there was a security camera that was actively recording, then there was probably an office or a security room or something. I scooted to my left along the wall, trying not to look at the hairless arms connected to the wrinkled hands until I reached the corner of the store. I could see straight down the aisle, all the way to the simple wooden door along the back wall. An office. Holding my breath, I steeled myself. I squeezed my eyes shut so tight I saw stars behind the lids. And then I ran. I held my arms out in front of me and ran through my self-imposed darkness. My closed eyes were my bravery. By some miracle, I only bumped into the shelf to my right once, and it was only with my hand before I reached the door. I gripped the handle, praying for it to be unlocked. It was. I flung open the door and stumbled in, slamming it closed behind me and smashing the push button lock into place. I fumbled for a light switch, and when I found it, it revealed a broom closet of an office. No windows, but there was a door across from me that gave me such a surge of hope I almost fainted right then and there. The rest of the room boasted a very small desk with an ancient desktop computer on it and a folding chair. The shabby furniture blocked an easy path to the other door, and as I was clambering past it, the computer whirred life. I must have bumped the mouse on the desk. Momentarily distracted from my race to freedom, I realized it didn't even prompt a password to get in. It just opened up to some kind of security app. The homepage had 5 different buttons, each one labeled with a location. Alley 1, front door 1, aisle 1, aisle 2, stockroom 1, 2, 3. Feeling relatively safe for the time being, I double-clicked on Alley 1. An image of a dark passage between 2 brick buildings absolutely obliterated by rain filled the screen. There was a door on one of the walls. I X'd out of the screen and clicked on front door 1. It was a feed of the camera I had seen earlier just pointing at the front door. It still showed me cowering against the wall, and as I watched, I stood up and stuck my arms out in front of me before disappearing off screen. The feed must be slightly delayed. I X'd out of the video and clicked on aisle 1. I saw myself tearing through it, knocking bags of chips and loaves and bread onto the ground. I hadn't realized I made such a mess. Behind the refrigerated item doors, I could see just the slightest movement with the security camera, mostly just the reflection of the dim fluorescent lighting. Stomach uneasy, I exited out of the stream. I clicked on aisle 2 and saw more of the same. Mostly just a reflection of the dry goods on the shelves opposite the glass doors with just a hint of movement behind the reflected image. I exited the stream and clicked on stockroom 123. When I opened it, 3 different windows expanded to fill the screen. All of them were monochromatic grays, clearly on night mode. Staring at the screen, my jaw dropped open and my eyes were wide, unblinking. On the screen, from 3 different angles, I saw a nightmare. It was a narrow passage that clearly wrapped around the edges of the store, behind the refrigerated section. Through the security camera, I could see the backs of the shelves against one wall and a slim, chugging conveyor belt along the other wall, carrying boxes and bags of varying sizes. Between the 2 sides, I saw a writhing mass of bodies, pale white bodies swarming around each other like some sentient mass. The creatures were tall and skeletal, with bones protruding through loose, paper-thin skin. There were so many of them in that tight space between shelves and conveyor belt, but they were all moving, every one. A tight line of them pressed against the shelves, reaching long, spidery arms through the fluorescent portal to the store. Some of them pulled foods and drinks back from the shelves, either shoveling them into wide-open maws on bulbous heads or passing them backward to the horde behind them. Others carefully placed boxes and bags of frozen food back on the shelves, neatly and particularly. The creatures by the conveyor belts were collecting more goods than tucked in from a hole. The creatures by the conveyor belts were collecting more goods that tucked in from a hole in the far wall. Microwave dinners, energy drinks, frozen vegetables, slabs of meat. Ones that were not eating still had huge gaping mouths, jaws that dangled open like gauges without earrings in, swinging in a breeze I could not feel from here. Most of the creatures were completely nude. A smooth region visible between their skinny legs and backwards-facing knees. Others, though, had a familiar Team G-Mart t-shirt draped over their skeletal frames. A strangled cry escaped my mouth, just pure, wet terror. Tell me you wouldn't have screamed too. Tell me you wouldn't have had tears rolling down your rain-wet cheeks. Tell me you wouldn't be disturbed, traumatized, horrified, if you had seen what I saw. Call me crazy all you want, but if you had been at the G-Mart after 10 p.m. that Friday night, you would have seen it too. You would have been posting here in a last-ditch attempt for someone, anyone, to believe you too. The doctors don't. Your mom doesn't. The employees at that stupid grocery store say it didn't happen. The police didn't even warrant your story with a routine check. I didn't even bother to close out the video feed. I just pushed past the folding chair to the door, knocking it over in the process and letting out a cacophonous thump. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the screen sparkle suddenly with shiny eyes. Hundreds of them, all looking up and directly at the security cameras, directly at me. I grabbed the door handle with both hands and wrenched it open so forcefully it swung and slammed against the brick wall outside. I left it open behind me and tore down the alley, feeling the eyes of Alley 1 on my back. The rain immediately soaked me through, sloshing into my sides and weighing down my flannel. I kept running, my lungs burning and burning until I reached my building. I fumbled through the door code, which took 3 tries, and dove into the building. I raced up 2 flights of stairs to my floor and threw open the door I hadn't bothered to lock when I left. I bolted the door and for good measure pushed my coffee table against it. Shaking, I fell back onto my couch. I just remember thinking, no one will believe me. I did go back. Wouldn't you have? 2 Fridays later, I went back. I slipped through the sliding automatic door at 9:55 and sidestepped the same old lady rushing to leave. This time, there was someone sitting on the stool behind the counter, though. The same someone I had confronted last week, demanding they believe me, demanding they listen. They called me crazy and threatened to call the cops. Whistling, they checked the aisles for stragglers, i.e. me, but I hid behind the shelves and moved along with them to avoid getting caught. I waited until they left and locked up the front door, and I waited for the hands. I waited for the scraping and the movement and the silence. I've gone back a few more times since then, actually. I don't know what would help you believe me more. If I told you that I saw them every time I went back, or if I told you I never saw them again.
I got a flyer in the mail for a grocery store. Something isn't right about it. A new flyer came in the mail. I opened it up and started to read. I couldn't believe my eyes. "Hey, hon, come look at this," I said, pointing towards a section of the grocery store flyer. "Look how cheap these things are on the sale. 49 cents for 2 cans of spaghetti sauce? There must be a printing error," I exclaimed. Printed in large, bold letters at the top of the page read, "McCaesar Family Grocery." Never heard of the place, I thought to myself.
Look here, 2 packs of spaghetti noodles for 50 cents?
My wife, Claire, stated. I peered up from the flyer and gazed at Claire's face, grinning ear to ear. "Spaghetti for dinner tonight?" I said.
Yes, please.
She responded with a grin. I peered towards my watch. It read 9:35 a.m. I finished my coffee and put on my jacket when Claire called out.
Safe driving, Lee!
"Don't worry, I'm not in a rush. They were open all day," I exclaimed back. I opened the door and headed out. I got into my car and turned the key. I glanced at the flyer again to find the store's address. 1180 Highway 32. I typed it into Google Maps. The location looked like an old abandoned Walmart about an hour and 45 minutes away. I live in a small town called Mackinac City, Michigan, and the store is in Alpena, Michigan. I put my car in reverse and started my journey onto Highway 32. Everything was fine until about an hour in. Stretched as far as I could see was the biggest line of traffic I have ever seen. The word about the flyer must have gotten out fast. I let out a moan of frustration and started to scroll through social media, moving every 2 minutes or so. Finally, around 11:15 a.m., the traffic began to clear. As I approached Alpena, I noticed that almost every car that was a part of the traffic jam was turning right onto Highway 32. Weird, I thought they were heading to the store as well, I thought. I continued on my journey. I watched the trees slowly fade into buildings as I approached Alpena. I stared at the billboard outside the store as I approached it. I flicked on my blinker and turned into the parking lot. The lot was surprisingly empty, only housing around 5 to 6 cars. I backed into the closest spot to the door and shut the car off. I stepped out and took a deep breath of the fresh air, stretching my legs. I peered towards the store windows and paused. 4 cashiers were staring at me, smiling through the window. I anxiously smiled and gave them a slight wave. No reaction. My smile faded. I popped open the trunk, grabbed a few reusable bags, and headed inside. As the sliding doors opened, a little chime played over the store's PA system, followed by a woman's voice.
Welcome to McCaesar Family Grocery. We hope you enjoy your shopping experience.
I grabbed a cart out of the receptacle and started to browse the aisles. I realized that there were no price tags on anything, so I went up to the front to grab a flyer. I didn't see any in the basket, so I asked an employee. It was a young woman, mid-20s. She was looking completely straight with a huge, painful-looking smile. Hey there, can I have a flyer, please? She ignored me. Excuse me? Can I have a flyer? She turned to look at me. Her eyes terrified me. They looked empty, soulless even. I began to stutter my words out of fear. Without saying a word or breaking eye contact, she picked up a flyer from underneath her counter and handed it to me. Thanks. I took a deep breath and walked away, peering behind me to see her still staring. I started to calm down as I shopped. I was texting my wife about the weird employees, but they weren't going through. I decided to give her a call to ask her about what spaghetti sauce to buy. I typed in her number and put the phone up to my ear. It rang 2 to 3 times when Claire answered.
Hey babe, how's it going?
She said. Not too bad, I guess, anyway. What kind of sauce do you want me to buy? They have garlic, regular, spicy. As I peered at the different sauces, I caught an employee out of the corner of my eye. It was an older man. He didn't match the rest of the employees I had seen. This man was frowning. He looked really unhappy. He was at the other end of the aisle about 20 feet away, staring at me. I froze. I started to get creeped out when I heard Claire in my ear.
Hello? Lee? Are you there?
I snapped out of my trance and looked back at the shelf. Yeah, hello? Sorry, some guy's staring. Never mind, he's gone, I said anxiously.
What do you mean? Are you okay, Lee?
She said in a worried tone. Yeah, I'm good. Anyway, what kind of sauce do you want? I said.
Let's try the garlic one. It's the flavor my mom always uses.
She said. Her spaghetti is the best. I'm gonna grab a bunch so we have them, I said excitedly.
Good idea. I'll see you later, hun. Be safe.
She said. Love you. Bye. I ended the call. I peered back up to where the man was and looked back down at my cart. I took another deep breath and started to push the cart when the PA chimed again.
Customers, please keep all devices off at all times to avoid interference with our PA system. Thank you.
This was starting to get weird. I need to grab a few more things and get the hell out of here. I continued through the aisles when I received a text from Claire.
What store did you say you were at again?
It read. I replied, McCaesar Family Grocery. Why? There was a short pause when she typed again.
It says online that it closed down 2 years ago.
I froze. My heart started beating out of my chest. I looked up to see a man enter my aisle, pushing a cart full of items, smiling. To get checked out, I had to pass him. I started to approach, my heart beating faster every step I took. These prices are amazing, the man said. He had a slight British accent and sounded like a droid. Yeah. My heart was in my throat. The man stared at me for a moment and spoke again. Do you own a mobile device? If so, you should shut it off to ensure you are following the McCaesar Family Grocery terms. I didn't know what to say. I was frozen. His smile slowly started to fade into a frown. I began to continue towards the store counter when he said something from behind me. Rule breaker! You are a rule breaker, Lee. I whipped my head around as fast as I could. The man was gone, his cart frozen where he was standing. Another chime played throughout the store. this time a note deeper.
Attention customers. The store will be closing on May 20th, 2022. You have about -2 years until we close. Everything must go. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, you. Lee is a rule breaker. Lee is a rule breaker.
I gasped and looked around frantically. At that moment, every employee started to walk towards me, never breaking their gaze. On their faces, a frown, tears streaming from their eyes. All of them were repeating the same thing. I pushed my cart into the closest one, which made him topple like a mannequin. I sprinted out of the store and jumped in my car. I was shaking badly and freaking out, so I dropped the keys on the floor of my car. I bent over to pick them up. As I got back up and turned the key, half of the employees were now surrounding my car. At my driver's side window was a lady who gave me the flyer. She started to lean back from the waist and began slamming her head into the window, cracking it. I put the car into gear and slammed on the gas pedal, sending a few of them flying. I looked into my rear-view mirror as I drove away. All the employees were staring at me, smiling once again. Slowly, they began to turn around and walk back into the store, never breaking their gaze with me. I went over 30 the whole way home. The highway was empty and my heart didn't stop racing until I was home. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't even want to get out, thinking that one could still be attached to my car. My wife came out to greet me and helped bring in the groceries I didn't have. I jumped out of the car and latched onto her, sobbing.
What's wrong? Lee, what happened?
She said, worried. We went inside and I told her everything. Surprisingly, she believed me. This happened about 2 weeks ago and I'm still struggling to sleep at night. I've done everything in my power to find information about this grocery store, but nothing is coming up. I can't even find the flyer I originally had. Claire said she left it on the kitchen counter and didn't touch it. I'm not sure what happened to me or who those people, things are, but I took one thing away from this whole experience. If it's too good to be true, it probably is.
I got a customer who made some really odd purchases. Cashiering is so easy, it's boring. It eventually becomes an endless line of faces I don't care to remember, with mundane items I scan on autopilot. A pineapple, beep. A pizza, beep. A gallon of milk, beep. I check the clock for the 10th time during my shift. It's only 4 p.m. I don't clock out until midnight. They sigh. New customer. I greet them with the standard, "How are you doing?" The hood covers their face. They nod in response. A shovel. Beep. A roll of duct tape. Beep. Rubber gloves. Beep. I raise my eyebrow and take a second look at the customer. I see stubble, a scar on his chin. His head is down, so I can't make out the rest of his features. He's tall. A hunting knife. Beep. A pack of Ziplocs. Beep. A flashlight. Beep. I glance around to check if anyone else is seeing what I'm seeing. The other customers in line are paying more attention to the magazine selection than Ted Bundy over here. Well, gotta do my job. 3 gallons of bleach. Beep. A box of garbage bags. Beep. A meat grinder. Beep. What? I risk yet another glance. He's looking at me. Shoot. That'll be $243.80. Of course he pays in cash. Have a good one. My voice cracks. He nods and walks away. I realize I never heard him speak. I'm put off. Then the next lady in line wants to know where the eggs are, and they're literally in her eye line, and it's a normal, boring day at work again. After my shift is over, I've got a headache and my feet hurt. I'm ready to go home, soak in my tub, and binge watch something. It's cold outside. Winter's been holding our town at gunpoint for a week. I put my hands in my sweater pockets to warm them on the short walk to my car. As I'm approaching the employee parking lot, I see a dark shape huddle down behind my car. The only one in the lot other than my boss's truck. What? I instantly remember the shady customer. My heart starts beating fast. I'm not going over there by myself. I had to go straight back inside the store. I see my boss, Rick. He's locking up. Hey, can you walk me to my car? I think I saw someone hiding over there. Yeah, like someone's ducked down behind my car. My teeth are chattering. I regret not bringing a jacket. Yeah, I'll walk you. He finishes locking up and we briskly walk to the employee parking lot. He circles my car a couple times while holding his phone as a flashlight, indicating with his hand that I stay back. I'm happy to comply. I'm not seeing anything. If there was someone out here, they're gone by now. I can see Rick's breath. Thanks for checking. Inside my car, I check the back, just in case. Empty. Other than the fast food wrappers. I breathe a sigh of relief. It's a calm ride home. It's not until I've pulled into the parking garage that I notice a slip of paper on the dashboard. A receipt. I don't remember making any purchases, and I'm in the habit of throwing trash in the back. Don't judge me. I scan the list of items and my heart stops. Shovel, tape, gloves, knife, bleach, bags. There's something written on the back. I turn it over, my hand shaking. You forgot to check the trunk. Late one night, a couple weeks or so ago, just as I was settling down to enjoy my dinner of dry oven-baked chips and chicken nuggets, there came a sharp knock at the door. I frowned. Not because I was looking forward to this meal, the same one I'd had every night for the last week, but because I wasn't expecting anyone, nor do I normally get random drop-ins from friends. I made my way to the front door and opened it, only to find darkness and emptiness greeting me. Confused, I cast my eyes downward and saw a plain brown paper bag resting on the doorstep. I flicked on the porch light and then bent down to examine the bag and its contents. Inside, I could see an assortment of groceries that I had not ordered. I looked around again, but no one was there. The street was clear, which was weird, as the time between the doorbell ringing and me opening the door would have been mere seconds. I was surprised someone had managed to drop off the food, ring the bell, and either get back to their car or on their bike and get out of view in that time. Glancing around for the last time, I scooped the bag up in my arms and stepped back inside. I cleared some space and emptied the groceries on the bench. There was no receipt, no indication of where they had come from. I didn't recognize any of the brands, as none bore familiar, recognizable labels. Among the items, there was a pack of red steak, its packaging marked only with a harvested date. Weird. There was a 2-liter bottle of SPF 500 sunblock. Seemed a bit overkill. An oversized jar of garlic-free herbs and spices, an unmarked bottle of red wine, and a mysterious bottle of tomato sauce. A plain white sticker on the front of the bottle with the words, "Life Sauce," across it. That was it. No ingredients list, company marketing, bottled, or expiry dates. Now, honestly, under normal circumstances, I would have endeavored to return these groceries. But with inflation the way it is and the economy tanking, I decided to keep the groceries for myself. Plus, there were no contact details or receipts to be found even if I did want to return them. So, I put the meat in the freezer, the wine in the empty wine rack, the herbs and spices with the others, and left the sunscreen on the counter. But I opened the sauce immediately, pouring a generous amount over my dinner. Its flavor was unlike any other tomato sauce I had tasted, rich and savory with subtle hints of spices. It was a luxury I had cut out of my weekly shops as I tightened my financial belt, and I savored every bite. Over the following days, I found myself consuming the sauce with almost every meal, amazed at its ability to enhance even the simplest of dishes. I would go overboard too, drowning my food in delicious red condiment. And within days, I was down to the last remaining drops, the clear container looking empty in my hands. I decided not to throw it out in the hope I could scrape the last drops on my breakfast. But the following morning, when I opened the fridge, my jaw dropped. There, on the middle shelf of my fridge where I left it, was my tomato sauce bottle. Only, it was no longer empty. I picked the bottle up, staring at it perplexed. I turned it over and back again. It was heavy, full to the brim with the dark red sauce. On the front was the label Life Sauce, as it was before. Only this time underneath, in a small font, was the number 1. I wondered whether it was always there, and I had just missed it. It still didn't explain how I was currently holding a completely full bottle of sauce when it was completely empty the night before. I was completely stumped. But I was also hungry, so I put aside the mystery sauce and fried up some bacon and eggs. Once again, over the next couple days, I managed to work my way through the bottle of sauce with little effort. I placed the practically empty bottle in the fridge, and once again in the morning, it was full. The only difference was that number 1 had now been updated to a 2. And so, this continued each time I emptied the bottle. I would find it miraculously refilled the next morning, as if by some unseen hand. And then last week, there came another knock at the door. I had once again been about to eat my dinner and had just poured a generous helping of sauce on my plate. I was holding the bottle in my hand, looking at the number 13 that was now branded on the bottle. Wondering for the 100th time how the bottle refilled itself and how the number kept changing when 3 sharp knocks at the door broke my concentration. I opened the door and was met by a tall, elderly man, dressed in attire straight out of a Sherlock Holmes film. He held in one hand a black walking cane with a large diamond head, a red shimmer flickering in his eyes. His pale skin stretched tight across his gaunt face. He nodded politely and apologized for the late-night intrusion, speaking with a distinct European accent. He inquired if I had received his misplaced groceries, but I feigned ignorance, shuffling slightly in the doorway as I attempted to shield the sauce that was on the bench behind me from his view. I saw his eyes shift from behind my back to my face. I stifled a breath as I figured I had just been sprung, then relaxed, slightly. Even if he did see the bottle on the bench, how would he know that we didn't just buy it from the same place? We stood in silence for a moment before he cleared his throat and apologized again for keeping me from my dinner, turning his shoulder to leave. One more thing before I leave, he said as I started closing the door. I stopped and looked at him. If by chance it should be delivered to your humble abode, you ought to be informed of the contents of the groceries. Allow me to clarify, I do not obtain my provisions from any ordinary purveyor. To acquire the necessities I require, I conduct transactions in the shadowy corners of the web. Life has undeniably become more expedient in this century, I dare to say. I shuffled uneasily in the doorway as he continued. Amidst the assortment of specialty items lies a sunscreen, providing shelter to individuals afflicted with porphyria, a sensitivity to sunlight. Also present were delectable cuts of red meat sourced from bipedal animals. Furthermore, there was the sauce, touted by the vendor as possessing a unique potency, able to regenerate itself by drawing upon the life force of an unsuspecting human. I must have worn a look of confusion on my face, which he seemed to enjoy as he continued. Therefore, should you chance upon it, exercise caution in its utilization so as not to arouse suspicion. Those who have been depleted of their life essence typically reside in close proximity within a radius of a few blocks at most. My jaw ajar, I I mumbled something akin to a thank you and closed my door, returning to my food as I contemplated what he had meant. Drawing upon the life force of an unsuspecting human? What was that? I slid my plate to the side and opened my phone. I had no idea where to begin, so I started with sauce that regenerates itself by drawing upon the life force of an unsuspecting human. Nothing relevant came up, and then I searched tomato sauce that magically refills itself. Again, no relevant results. Lastly, I typed in mysterious deaths near me. This got a lot of results. I filtered to news, and then to the last month. Multiple news stories covered mysterious cases in my local suburbs, cases where people had been found dead in their homes. In most cases, their partners had woken to find a pale, gaunt, and lifeless version of the partner they had fallen asleep next to the night before. There had been no signs of injury, no blood nearby, and they had been completely normal in most cases the night before. But they were now completely drained of blood. My stomach dropped as I finally understood what he was saying. I felt like vomiting, realizing that somehow I had been dining on the thick, bloody, savory, delicious blood of my neighbors for the last few weeks. Life sauce. Life source. My head spun as I grabbed the bottle and stumbled towards the kitchen bin, ready to throw the sauce out and destroy everything else that had come in that grocery bag that night. But then again, with inflation the way it is, and the economy tanking, and it was the best sauce I have ever tasted. I am more aware now of the amount I use. I try not to waste it. I am proud that in the weeks since that visit, the number sits at only 15. I think I've done pretty well, if I'm honest. Don't you? I'm never going to that grocery store again. At least I'll try not to. But that milk, it's great. It seems normal from the outside. It's the kind of store you'd see in a dream. The outside is a crisp green with the name of the store in clean white lettering. The birds not even managing to streak it with their expulsions. It's my go-to store, and until now it hasn't felt this weird. In fact, I swear it used to be a little more decrepit, but I guess they just renovated. The cars in the parking lot were all red that day, and as I walked behind them, I was concerned that they may have reversed and run me over. People often buy a nice pastry or sandwich, and half their mind is concentrating on that rather than what's behind them, and I was watching the lights on each car, making sure that they were about to not reverse. I bumped into one that was parked a little further out than the others. I just hoped I hadn't scratched it somehow. I didn't have the money to pay for a repair. It seemed fine, but then I worried that perhaps someone had seen me and might scratch it themselves and then blame me. I shook the thought out of my head and hurried inside the store's safety. I was finally away from the possibility that I may turn the tarmac red and just hoped that no one had seen me bump into the car. The store used to have a bell that dinged whenever someone entered, but it seems that they had removed it. I wondered that day whether I had walked into the wrong store or that perhaps this was a new pop-up in my town. It didn't matter much, though. They still sell the same products. I picked up a basket, which, from the look of the handles, had not been used possibly at all. Milk, apples, yogurts, and bread were on my list, so I headed to the dairy aisle first. The floors, much like the outside, were perfectly shiny, but again, perhaps it was a new store and maybe there hadn't been many people in there yet. I was sure that this was the same store I always went to, but something felt off about it. And I couldn't put my finger on it. It was also quite empty and pretty quiet. It didn't even seem like workers were restocking the shelves and making the usual racket as they tore open the cardboard boxes. When I say not busy, I realized soon enough that I may have been the only one in the store. There wasn't even the usual beep of the tills, just the cashier sat there, hands rested upon their laps and looking at me as I made my way to the milk. When I found the aisle, and yes, it was where I expected it to be, I realized that perhaps they had just rebranded. The milk, yogurts, and cheese were not the usual brand names. My go-to milk was always Fairlife. I always found it the creamiest. However, it seemed as if all the food was now the grocery store's own brand. The milk cartons were as basic as it comes. The semi-skimmed was blue and was labeled milk. The full-fat one pink. I picked the full-fat one up and put it in my basket. I noticed as I scanned the shelves that everything was the same price. But again, perhaps it was an introductory offer for their new own brand products. I started to prefer this store to my other one because everything was packaged ever so perfectly. The food inside as if it was made from plastic. The cheese's surfaces were so smooth, not the usual holes that speckle the surface and make me wonder whether perhaps there will be maggots writhing around inside the block. Next were the yogurts. Once again, very basic packaging with a simple label telling you what flavor they were. I picked banana, which I'd never tried before. The other flavors just didn't sound appealing. I then headed over to the bread aisle, where I usually pick the seeded loaf. As you can imagine, the bags were simplistic, and when I picked up the loaf, I realized that the seeds had been placed meticulously onto the surface. No seeds fell to the bottom as I placed it in my basket, as if they had used some food-safe superglue. Apples were last. The produce aisle was full of the most vibrant picks. Oranges with seemingly no dimples upon their surfaces, carrots with no marks on their skin. The same goes for the bananas. And much like everything else that I had put in my basket, everything was $1.75, which I did think was a little steep for one banana, but they did look delicious. I placed 2 apples in my basket and I was ready to check out. I headed to the cashier and placed my goods on the conveyor belt, and as the apples tumbled forward, I noticed that their glossy red surfaces began to get coated in a green fuzz. The cashier then picked the apple up and looked at me. Her eyes grew wide, and that's when my stomach sank. This really was all very strange. No other customers, everything the same price, and the eerie sound of silence. "Did you touch the red cars outside?" the lady said to me as she held the apple. It felt like an apple had become lodged in my throat, and I struggled to get my words out. Yes, it was an accident. "That's why the apple's gone all moldy, you see," the lady said as she held the apple towards me, the mold continuing to spread across it. I don't understand. "I will have to call the manager, and he won't be happy about this," the woman said as she placed the apple down before picking up the phone. "Customers touched a red car outside and the infection is now spread onto the produce." At this moment, I was wondering if perhaps this was all some strange reality TV show that I had walked in on, to film my reaction to the absurdity. "Don't leave." I waited for about 5 minutes, not quite sure what to make of the situation, while the cashier just stared at the moldy apple. "Lock the door, Sarah. We have to fix this. He won't be happy, I tell you," a man's voice said from behind me. I turned to see the manager, his silver name tag gleaming, his hair brushed over to one side, his eyes as wide as the lady's were. His eyes were strange looking, more than the fact that they were wide open. It was as if I was actually looking at my own reflection when I stared into them, my own eyes encased by features that were certainly not mine. "Yes, sir." Sarah then pushed a button behind the till, causing a quick succession of clicks to echo through the store, presumably the doors locking. At this point, I was sure that this must be some TV show, which would also make sense, seeming as no other customers were inside, and most likely that was because they had gone to the normal store, which clearly I had somehow missed and found myself here. "You really ought to be more careful when you walk through a car park with red cars," the man said as he began to wring his fingers, his chest rising quickly. "The whole store could be contaminated now. The whole store! My boss is going to be very mad. All this produce ruined," the man yelled. I stepped back. "The only way I can rid the store of contamination is you, customer. What is going on? If this is some TV show, then I'm sure you have a good enough reaction for me already. TV show? Absurd! You need to come with me now. My boss will not be happy with this, the man said as he moved forward to grab me. It's just a TV show. Maybe if you play along, they may pay you more. Just go with him. I followed the man, lurching away as he tried to grab my arm. You don't need to touch me, I'll follow. I followed the nervous wreck of a man until we go to the doors that led to the back. This must be where everyone jumps out at me and tells me that it's all a joke. The thing is, there was still fear hidden behind this false pretense, but I was scared that if I tried to run, things might actually make a turn for the worse, so I kept telling myself this was some TV show and hoped that if I repeated these words in my head, that it would be true. I followed him into the back. As the doors opened, cold air flooded over my exposed ankles, my face prickling. It was quite dark in the back, and I watched as the door swung shut, the little light that flooded in gone. Keep following me, the man said as he shuffled across the floor. We came to a large metal door with a bar across it. It's just a TV show, it's just a TV show, it's just a TV show. Say it again, it's just a TV show. It's just a TV show. It would all be fine. This was all just a TV show. He pushed the bar on the door and it opened into a room much darker than the one we were in. He looked at me with his eyes wide, and that's when he lurched towards me, grabbing me. I struggled as his grip on me became stronger. Surely this was not allowed if it was a TV show. He pulled me into the dark room, slamming the door shut behind us. The lights buzzed on, and he stood against the metal door, locking it. The smell was not pleasant, rotting, decaying. The smell scraped against my nose. You have to rid the store of the contamination. I still do believe this was some sort of TV show. At the end of the day, they needed to push me to my very limits because the edge of those limits would produce the most money. I turned to see meat hooks suspended from the ceiling. The pork or beef were wrapped up in white plastic packaging that I couldn't quite see through. Out of the bottom were tubes with green residue coating the inside, laying on the floor. The others also clumsily walked into the red cars. They also caused contamination in the store. The others? The manager pointed to the bagged carcasses, and I felt the cold air twist around my arms and legs and up my neck. I need you to make the cure. The doc, my boss, requires everything to be sterilized, he said as he took a syringe from his pocket, the liquid as green as the outside of the shop. This is when the belief that this was just a TV show failed to sugarcoat what was happening. This guy was about to inject me with some toxic waste-looking stuff, and I daren't think about what was actually wrapped up in those bags. I moved backwards, the words trapped beneath the apple that was still very much lodged inside my throat and growing ever bigger. I bumped into the hanging carcasses. They're pigs. They're pigs. They're pigs. They're pigs. They're not human. Don't struggle, or the needle will get stuck in your neck, he said as he walked towards me. It has to be a TV show. I mean, come on. This was all just completely unrealistic. I managed to get some words out of my mouth, somewhat with difficulty. What is the green stuff in the tubes? What is it for? It's the cure. To spray the produce, get rid of the contamination you brought indoors. It clicked in my mind that if I had in fact become contaminated by that car, then I was still very much contaminated. I could touch him, and he would then be as contaminated as the fruit. If I touch the cars, then I'm still contaminated. If you use me to make the cure, then all you'll be spraying the fruit with is more even concentrated contamination. Best way is to get me out of the shop and throw away the bad apple. He stopped walking towards me for a moment and took a step back away from me. Yes, you're right. I must ring my boss to see if this is allowed. He pulled his cell phone from his pocket and dialed his boss's number. Doc, the customer's saying that if I make the cure from her, it'll cause a mass contamination of the store. What do I do? He nodded as he listened to his boss and placed the syringe back into his pocket. He said you need to leave and take the apple with you. It's on the house. The man opened the door and gestured for me to follow him, and he briskly walked through the dimly lit back room, flinging the doors that led into the store open. Sarah, open the doors, he yelled as we walked past the milk aisle. I heard the clicking as my freedom was granted. Take the apple, the manager said as he pointed to the rotting fruit, and leave. I happily obliged, picking up the furry apple and heading to the entrance along with the milk and other things. When I got home and took the apple out of the bag, it no longer had mold on it. Perhaps it rubbed off, although that doesn't seem like a plausible answer. I never did see a TV show. Perhaps it is still in production, for when I passed the store the other day, it was still seemingly in use. But now there's a very large sign saying, "Do not touch red cars. If you do, you will be denied entry to the store." I haven't been inside since, as knowing me, I would accidentally touch the cars, and perhaps this time I wouldn't be so lucky as to escape. But sometimes I do crave the taste of the milk I got from that store. Seems to work better than the Fairlife when I need some cookies and milk to calm my nerves.
Thank you so much for listening to this narration. I hope you enjoyed. A quick thank you to my patrons, Rinku Starr, William Hartley, Cupcake Hips, Alonzo, IC Narrates, and Jesse Hartley. Again, thank you all so much for your support. If you've got any prayer requests, feel free to reach out to me on any social media, and I would love to know how I can be praying for you. And also, about each month, I link a different cause in the description to donate money to, people going through some tough surgeries or funds for victims of natural disasters, etc., etc. If you've got a little extra money to give to someone in need, I've got at least one link for you each month in the description. So that's there for you to do that if you feel that you can. Even if it means that you unsubscribe from my Patreon, that's absolutely wonderful. Much love, and thank you guys again for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.